Hey everybody, it's Mike from The Mike Wagner Show. If you like The Mike Wagner Show and you want to make your own podcast, well, let me tell you about Anchor. First of all, it's free. Secondly, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. You can also add any song from Spotify directly to your episodes. The possibilities are endless. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you. You can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, many more. You can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. Hey everybody, it's Mike from The Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs at below the competition rate. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention The Mike Wagner Show, get 20% off first project. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, time to give an official shout-out to our official sponsor of The Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you'll love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is illusion and those you love will either first go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has gotten great reviews, and Eve Levin enjoys by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassidy, Forbes Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today for Goes Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Also, check out The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com on over 40 podcast platforms, heard in over 100 countries, including Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also, Anchor FM, iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, Audible, Apple Music. Also heard on Hamilton Radio, Diamonds FM, Oldies Radio, and more. Take The Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to The Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Follow The Mike Wagner Show on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok today. And for great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com and check out The Mike Wagner Show podcast. T-shirts, pop sockets, throw pillows, tote bags, hoodies. Makes great gifts 24/7. Amazon.com. Check out The Mike Wagner Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia for great books like Missing, Once, and Wrinkles. Also, T-shirts, pop sockets, hoodies, phone cases, and more. Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia. Check it out today. I'll support The Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, and themikewagnershow.com. Make sure you do so today. We're here with a terrific gentleman who can't wait to get on the program. He's an actor, comedian, writer born in Morristown, New Jersey, to Brazilian parents and raised in Sao Paulo. And he also was fascinated with the movies at a very young age, influenced by his dad, and in a prominent role as a Warner Brothers executive. We'll talk about that. And of course, he went to graded school in Sao Paulo, also Bellis boarding school in Jacksonville, Florida. He also began his career as a voice actor, created his first video at 7, and began with Damon's Dash DD172. And he also speaks 3 languages, celebrity impersonator, and an avid swimmer holding Olympic qualifying trials. And we can all use that, right? So he's also winner of the 20 accolade global film competition, 21 winner of the Chandler International Film Fest, and creative director of Universal's Flava, and is also a comedian. And how did he get to be a comedian? We'll talk about that. He's done some projects. Live, ladies and gentlemen, from Plus Studios in beautiful downtown Los Angeles, the multi-talented actor, comedian, writer from Morristown, New Jersey, and to Brazilian parents, raised in Brazil. And he's in Los Angeles, and he's going to put on a show tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, the amazing multi-talented Dennis Feitosa, best known as Def Noodles. Dennis, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Mike. I appreciate you.
Well, it's great to have you on board as well, too. And I can tell you wanted to get on the show, and this is so amazing, too. So, I checked out your work. It's great. And you've got, we'll talk about your upcoming projects as well with the new web series. You've been with Eric Roberts. You've also been in Applaud, The Thief, Job Interview, and more. You're an actor, comedian, writer from Morristown, New Jersey, to Brazilian parents. You lived in Sao Paulo, Brazil for a while. You got fascinated with movies, influenced by a dad who was a Warner Brothers executive, and you also began a career of voice actor, created your first video at 7, and you also were in Damon's Dash DD172, and you also speak 3 different languages, celebrity impersonator. You're an avid swimmer holding Olympic qualifying times, and you also became a career director at Univision Flama, and you also did some Alien Covenant parody as well, too, and doing a web series. And you stumbled into a new venture during the pandemic. And before getting to all that, Dennis, tell us how you first got started.
Tell us what? Sorry.
Tell us how you first got started.
Oh, how I first got started in life or making videos or in the business or
go into the Wayback Machine, Sherman, the Wayback Machine.
way back? Okay. So it's actually one of those stories that you just hear in this business, and it just seems a little bit like an urban legend. But when I was like maybe 5 or 6 years old, I was in Brazil, where I grew up with my parents. I was born in New Jersey, but I never really lived there. I was like I grew up, I lived there I was born there by accident. I lived there maybe like 2 months, and then my parents moved back to Brazil. And my brother was born 18 months after me. He was born in Brazil, and I grew up there. Never really lived in America. But I was in Sao Paulo. We were at the mall, like walking around with my mom. It was me, my brother, and my mom. And I was like arguing with my brother over something like really petty, like little kids do. And this woman walked up to us and said, "Oh, I like your kids. They're funny." And like she gave my mom her card and said, "I'd love to represent them to go so they can go out for commercials," right? And that's how I started auditioning for commercials, and then eventually that led into voiceover work and other things. But yeah, I started also from a very young age, just with my brother, messing around, making videos and making like short films and other things. And yeah, all of that kind of led me to where I am. So
that's really interesting. And it all started with an argument almost over nothing. I think we should all do that. Start an argument, just get somebody's attention.
Yeah. It was an argument that was literal. I don't even remember what the argument was. I just remember like the lady walking up to my mom doing that. My mom was like hesitant, but then a week later we were in this office, and I was auditioning for a part, and I had to like skateboard. And I was like 5 or 6. I never skateboarded before. I eventually started skateboarding, but at the time I didn't even know how to stand on top of the skateboard. I just remember going off the infinity wall and the skateboard going right through it. And I was like, okay. So yeah, that was definitely something.
And certainly was as well too. And you also were fascinated with movies as a young kid, influenced by a dad who was a Warner Brothers executive. And tell us about that venture as well too.
Well, I got very lucky. My dad, my dad was the first person in his family to go to college. Like he came from a very poor area in Brazil, in the northeast of Brazil, which is it's called Ceará, and it's like a very dry like area. There's no water. They had to drill down like literally like maybe 10-20 feet into the ground to bring up water. They had to have a well and stuff. They had to have like a live-in teacher to teach. My brother had like 8 or 9 brothers.
Wow.
And sisters, and they all lived in the same house, and they had to have like a live-in teacher to teach them so that they could do the basic education. And then eventually, I think when my dad was like 6 or 7, they moved down to Sao Paulo, which is where he lived the rest of his life, and eventually married my mom and stuff. And so from there, my dad, like all his brothers and sisters, because he was the second youngest, they pooled their money together, essentially got him to go through college, and he got a job at Deloitte. And after 6 years of applying so he could go and finish his CPA in America, he was selected via lottery to go. And then ironically enough, my mom was already pregnant. Like they got married a month, my mom was pregnant, and they got married a month before he was selected to go after he spent years applying. So then That's the story of how he ended up going to New Jersey and then finishing his CPA degree at NYU. And he was there for just 7 months or something like that. And then the month after that, he moved back to Brazil. And about, I think a couple of years later, he was hired by Warner Brothers, and he worked at Warner Brothers for about a decade. But he left in 2003, so he hasn't really been. And it's Warner Brothers in Brazil. So he did end up coming here, like I think once every few months, for meetings and stuff. But yeah, he worked for Warner Brothers in Brazil, and it was good because we got a lot of screeners, so I got to watch a lot of movies, and that's really what ended up kind of inspiring me to do what I do. I was always around movies and animations, and just being a kid, I would emulate the voices and even draw the cartoons that I would see, and I was just imitating everything I was seeing because I wanted to replicate it and make it my own, right? And that's kind of like what started my creative journey. The first short film I remember doing. I don't even want to call it a short film. Just the first video I did with my dad and my brother. We were in his office, and I had to do a report card for this book, this like Roald Dahl book, the BFG, the Big Friendly Giant,
Mm-hmm.
and we were, my dad filmed it. My brother was like just acting up and kind of heckling me off camera, and I was just like playing this not at all serious like anchorman person, and we were just joking around. And I talked a little bit about um, the book, and that was it. Everything was an excuse for me to make it like creative, video of some sort. Every time I got in like a group project, I would always be the one who did the visual aspect of it somehow, whether it was just like a PowerPoint slide presentation, and I would like make it way more creative than it had to be, or it was a video itself. But yeah, eventually I taught myself how to edit on Premiere, and I think I was like 14 or 15 when that happened. I was
Oh,
editing
wow.
mostly in camera, yeah, up until then, and then I was like, oh wow, I can edit in a computer and make it a lot easier, right? So that's how I started doing. Then I started using Premiere, and then eventually Final Cut. Um, and I was a part of my school's like AV team or group, and I took like classes, and I got a little bit better here and there, and then. But yeah, it's always been something I did, and I've always been passionate about. So I feel like it's been kind of inevitable for me to get to where I am.
Mm. That's rather interesting too. You also got noticed, working on Damon Dash's DD172, and tell us about that project.
Yeah, so that was my first job. So I have to backtrack a little bit. So I ended up going to film school in Brazil, and it was just an awful experience all together, because growing up creating stuff, it was just film school was just the most, in Brazil at least, unsettling thing, because I would just go and I would watch all these old movies. I was watching like Eisenstein, Frank Capra, and all this stuff, which I love, but I was watching and I was like, I wasn't creating, which is really what I wanted to do. I grew up watching a lot of that stuff anyway, not the Eisenstein stuff, but that was like new stuff that my teachers were showing me. But like, I just wanted to make more. That's why I went to film school. And I like, the only way that they would let us make stuff is like we had to have like a school editor edit it for us, and we had to have someone else manage the camera. And I was like, I just want to do it myself. So I ended up eventually dropping out of film school and then transferring to Florida, from Sao Paulo to Florida, to finish my school, in advertising. And then 2 years later, I finished advertising and moved to New York, where I got my first job, which was working for Damon Dash. He was one of the founders of Rockefeller with Jay-Z and Biggs. He's very well known in the hip hop community. Definitely a very influential person in that world. He created Rockaware. He created Rachel Roy, a lot of like clothing brands as well. He's just a serial entrepreneur and a very successful person. And he kind of showed me the other side of the business itself, because there's a creative aspect, but there's like the entrepreneurial aspect of it. And I kind of learned by seeing and hearing him talk and seeing how he managed his businesses, just how you could also be creative as an entrepreneur and make cool things, right? Like he would say cool shit, cool fly shit, which is what he always focuses on. For him, like integrity is like a big thing. And a lot of those things, I would hear him talking, it kind of instilled the same spirit in me, because it was like the first like job I had in the business, job. I did a bunch of like jobs, like working as a PA here and there, but that was like the first time that I had like a job that I had to show up to like every day at a certain time, and I like create a certain amount of stuff. And it was great because it kind of just let me create whatever I wanted. So yeah, it was great. I learned a lot. And then I took those lessons and I've been applying them to things up to this day, really.
Mm-hmm. And you also did some work with upcoming artists like Currency, also did a concert documentary for Adidas, and also two unreleased concert tour documentaries as well, too. You wrote and directed 23
Yeah.
sketch shows, and also became creative director for Univision's Flama, which had to be amazing as well.
Yeah. That's a lot of years like compressed into one thing. But yeah, I went on tour with Currency. For those of you at home who don't know, Currency is a rapper from New Orleans. I went on tour with Currency, and there's like a rapper also from New York. His name's Smoke Dizza. There's a guy from Ohio, Stolly. So everybody went on tour to Toronto and the Northeast of Vermont and New York and in New York State, all that stuff. And it was great. So that was one. I shot and edited a documentary that was at the Brooklyn Bowl. That was before that, maybe a few months before that. And that ended up getting distributed in Adidas stores. And then the other stuff, I assume that Damon has the footage for it because I was working with him and collaborating with him when we shot that stuff. But yeah, that's I spent a good part of my formative years in this business shooting and working with a lot of musicians and rappers and just going on tour with them and shooting vlogs for them before vlogs were like really a thing. I crashed on there's this guy called the Mikey Rocks from the Cool Kids in Chicago, and I crashed on his couch for like a week at one point, and we just shot a bunch of music videos and vlogs, and it was just really cool. It was like it was some of the first steps that I took in this business, and then they eventually along with everything I was doing, I was also still pursuing training and practicing as an actor and comedian. So, when I moved to Florida, I always did acting training, even in Brazil. And I was always a part of community theater productions, even in Brazil. But when I moved to Florida, I started doing them like in the town that I was in. I did a lot of Shakespeare in the Park, a lot of that stuff. And then eventually when I moved to New York, I started getting involved with the improv theaters and there's UCB, there's the Magnet, the Pit, and the Annoyance, which is a theater from Chicago that later moved to New York. And I was involved, did a lot of one-man shows, a lot of improv shows for years. And that ended up leading me into stand-up, into doing open mics. And and then after years of doing that, I ended up, getting my own club, somehow things ended up leading into this. So
that's really,
and then
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, and then the Flama stuff ended up coming as a result of being involved in the UCB improv community. It was one of my friends. I was in an improv team with this guy Lee Chin, who's one of my friends, and we used to hang out a lot and just make stuff together. And then one day he worked at Flama. He was an editor. And he said, we need somebody who's Brazilian to write sketches about being Brazilian, because Flama, it was a millennial Latino, first generation Latino content house or whatever. It was like we were creating content for Latinos who primarily spoke English or like were really Americanized, right? So yeah, that's what I initially went on there to do. I wrote a couple of sketches that went really viral. Like one of them got over 5 million views in a day.
Wow.
Another one got over 8 million views in a day. And then I wrote other sketches, and I produced a bunch of different series with people who, at Flama. I made like, I used to make these little silly series of like, finish the song. I'd play like, which is a game show from Brazil. I assume that they have it here too, but in Brazil, there's this game show with this guy called Silvio Santos. He's like one of the biggest hosts in Brazil. And he would play like, it was essentially a challenge. Like if you could figure out the song with the fewest amount of notes, then you would win like something, right? And so like ultimately you would want to figure out the song with just one note, right?
It's like name that tune pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah.
I remember that game. Yeah, it's like there are times I get on one note, it takes me like several, and I still don't get it. I remember that very well.
Yeah. So it was kind of the same thing. I'd play like 3 seconds of the song, and it would be like the most, even if it was like a really recognizable song, I'd play the randomest part. And the focus was to just get funny, natural moments with people, which is like, it's what I think most people connect with. It's funny, natural moments where people are just being themselves and let their guards down and just having fun, which is kind of how I've been molding my social media persona as of late. It's been going more in that direction, even though I had my social media persona at first was completely satirical, and I was just making fun of people that I thought were absolutely despicable. But that's beside the point. But yeah, that's what I'm kind of like shifting my presence now towards, just which is something I feel like the internet kind of is missing. Like there's an aspect of authenticity which is really lost on the internet. A lot of people feel compelled to say what is popular or what other people think is right, and they kind of just go along with the flow, even if it's against their better judgment, and they'll just parrot all this shit, and essentially sometimes even destroy someone's lives without even double checking what's really happening.
Mm-hmm.
So
mm-hmm. And of course you also had some work done as well too. You also been with Applaud, The Thief, The Job Interview. You also have a new web series coming up with some involvement from Lauren Francesca, also Elizabeth Barden, also with Larry Hankin as well, too, from Friends and More. You also have Eddie. We'll talk about that and your comedy career. But first, listen to The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs at below the competition rate. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show. Get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, time to give official shout out to our official sponsor, the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is illusion and those you love be the first go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has garnered great reviews, and Eve 11 enjoys by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassidy, Forrest Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today before it goes missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Also, check out The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com and over 40 podcast platforms, heard in over 100 countries. Also on HamiltonRadio.net, Diamonds FM, Oldies Radio, and a few coming soon. Tickets with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to The Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Follow The Mike Wagner Show on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok today. For great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com and check out The Mike Wagner Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia for great books, merchandise, and more. Also support The Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, and themikewagnershow.com. Make sure you do so today. We're here with the amazing actor, comedian, writer from Sao Paulo, Brazil, Dennis Feitosa, best known as Def Noodles, here on The Mike Wagner Show. Before I talk about your comedy career and how it all came about, you also been in some movies, too, like Applaud, The Thief, The Job Interview, Classic, the TV series, The Great Brooklyn Bridge Party, and more. Tell us about some of your projects as well, too, and how you got involved and be inspired.
So I did a lot of short films in New York. Like I said, I never take a break. So I'm always working on weekends and filling up my time with doing stuff. So I collaborated with a lot of different people and did a lot of short films. Even went out on my own, like that Brooklyn Bridge thing was during the Occupy Wall Street protests. I just picked up my camera and I was like, I want to document some of it. I ended up on the bridge when like 800 people were arrested, and along with media, there were New York Times journalists and people from the Washington Post. Everybody was arrested and spent the night in jail, even though I was there to just film it. It was the first day that I ever went down to the protest. But as far as the classic, so one of my jobs, I worked doing broadcast, in Brooklyn, and I ended up collabing with with a guy who was on Matlock. His name is Danny. Forgot his last name. Danny. Man, I feel so bad. Anyway,
Matlock. The only person I could think of is like Andy Griffith from Matlock. Otherwise, that's it. But that was a good show, though.
Yeah, that was a good show. So he was on Matlock. He was the young guy on Matlock. I can't remember his last name. Danny something. If you remember, type it in the comments right now, or send Mike a message and let him know.
We certainly do. So we are accessible on Facebook, right? It's like you can do that all the time. I mean, that's social media for you. So we learn too. So
yeah. So I ended up producing a show where this was another, I guess, opportunity for me to like learn more about the greats and all that stuff. Because like it was a show where he essentially looked back on on this treasure trove of like old uh, movies and television shows and sitcoms and um, talk shows, and I got to essentially watch a lot of stuff that I'd never seen before, ever heard of. Like I knew about Lucy, but I got to watch like the entire spinoff that happened afterwards, which I hadn't really watched. I watched all the Chaplin movies. I watched a talk show that I had no idea existed, Red Skelton, and like I just that was my job, was to essentially watch stuff and curate it for the show. And I would watch 7 to 8 movies or TV shows a day, right?
Wow.
And then I would just like select what would make it onto the show. And this was like months and months and months. So my entire job was just watching stuff. So that ended up like informing me of a lot of like different things that you can do in production to make something like good, right? Look good. And really gave me an understanding of like the history of things and why certain things, why there's a laugh track, why certain things are filmed in front of a live studio audience, etc. So that was a show that I did, and like I said, I was, producing a lot of stuff on the side as well. And one thing led to another. I ended up finding a collaborator of mine, later, and we produced a lot of things together. We produced a pilot that with Larry Hankin, who's one of my favorite actors. He wasn't just on Friends; he was also on Seinfeld. He's
I
very
remember
recognizable. He's
that.
done a
Yeah,
lot.
I had him
Yeah,
on my show back then. It's like Larry Hankin. I thought I had that guy on. That guy was amazing. I mean, he had
he's
stories
so
like a
funny.
King's Scroll. Yes.
He is so funny. He's one of the funniest actors. He's old school. I think I talked to him about it. Like he went to Second City, I think, if I'm not wrong. He went to one of those Chicago schools. And I was
Mm-hmm.
talking to him, and like just very funny. It's always good to work with somebody who's been doing this like a lot longer than you, because you end up matching like experiences, right? Like I'm in a part of my journey that he probably went through already. So as like an improviser and comedian, he has his own like things that happen to him in this business, and it's always good to hear what somebody else experienced. And I always find that interesting. So he was super funny, improvised a whole lot. I let him do whatever the hell he wanted. I was directing it mostly. I acted in a few different. I played like a small part, but I directed it and co-wrote the script and produced it as well. And it was just a lot of fun, to do that like multi-camera coverage sitcom. Without it didn't have a laugh track, but we kind of made it work without the laugh track, without the live studio audience. We had some really amazing sound stages here in LA that we got to work with. They were at actually YouTube's headquarters here. They at the time they were building sound stages and letting YouTubers film there. They don't do this anymore, which is kind of a shame. But they were doing this at the time. I also got to shoot a short. They would do these kinds of things where they were like literally Fox would fly in an entire set from Alien Covenant, and they
Huh.
would set it up at YouTube. Then they would have YouTubers come in and they would do a whole campaign, right? They don't do this anymore, but I got to shoot one of the shorts that I shot was in the set of Alien Covenant, and it was funny because they had the same crew working throughout the whole thing. And I'd ask them how the other shoots went, and like one of the guys mentioned, "Oh yeah, you have no idea. Like during this shoot, we found the biggest spider I've ever seen, which I'm pretty sure ended up being flown with all the props over from Australia by mistake." So yeah, that was and that's pretty much what I feel like. Honestly, when you start listing out the stuff like that, I'm like everything feels kind of like a blur, because it's like I always make something and I don't stop. I move on to the next thing. So it's like it's compounding. So at this point, I have no idea how much I've even made. I think just on my YouTube channel alone, I've made over 1,200 videos in like the last 2
Nice.
years. Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely a lot. And I love to create. I really can't. Like I feel I can't stop. Like I if I ever do, I honestly feel bad. I can't. I can't like deal with myself if I ever stop.
Hmm.
The ideas just like end up becoming overwhelming.
Hmm. You also had another movie as well too with Eddie featuring Eric Roberts. That's a known name. So tell us more
Oh
about that.
yeah. So that was also with the collaborator, the same Lauren with whom I made the pilot. It was around the time actually we shot the movie first, and then we shot the pilot. It was like about a less than 2 or 3 weeks apart. But her dad had written a script and had spent a lot of his time developing that script. And her dad is a dance and acting teacher in Queens, and he has certain stories that he had developed that he was really looking forward to producing, and we ended up making it happen. It was on a shoestring budget. We brought everything together and ended up making what is called a 14-day miracle, which is like to shoot a whole movie in 14 days is like absolutely insane, especially for the budget that we had. It was about $70,000,
Wow.
but we had a 20-person crew and we squeezed it all out, and a lot of people working did their best too. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a great learning experience, and it led to other things. And I'm hoping to eventually go back to doing long form stuff as well.
Hmm. And,
So
and and of course, you talked a lot about checking out certain styles. I mean, influenced by certain styles, and copying
mhm.
certain styles, emulating certain styles, like in film, TV production, everything else. Who are some of your favorite directors growing up?
I think probably Stanley Kubrick. I was obsessed with Stanley Kubrick. I used to rewatch his movies every morning, uh, especially around the. I also have a pretty weird story. So when my dad was still at Warner Brothers, when Kubrick was alive, and I think I was maybe 11 or 10 years old when Kubrick died, and his last movie was Eyes Wide Shut, right?
Oh
Which
yes,
is
that was a
yeah,
classic. Nicole Kidman, Tom Cruise. That was a classic.
yeah, it was a great movie, and it got released. He finished the movie, and it got released shortly after he died. So it was released in movie theaters like shortly, maybe a few weeks after he passed away. And I remember my dad, he was like, "You have to watch this movie in a movie theater because it's Stanley Kubrick's last movie. He's the greatest movie director who ever lived. So you have to like experience it." And I mean, it's a totally inappropriate movie to take an 11-year-old. I didn't understand the movie, and there was like all the shit that's happening. And years later, I rewatched it, and I was like, okay, all this makes sense, right? But it was, I kind of value that my dad, even though it was a messed up movie to take an 11-year-old, I do value that my dad gave me that experience. I got to watch a Stanley Kubrick movie in a movie theater because when he was still like, when the movie came out, because later on, there's this place in New York that I had a membership for. It was a film forum, and they usually get reprints of film, and they'll play it. But it's not the same thing to watch a movie getting. It's different when you're there in the movie theater as the movie. You're experiencing it with everybody else for the first time, and yeah, that was something that was great. And that yeah, I grew up watching. I even watched Passive Glory, Spartacus, um, Clockwork Orange.
Clockwork
Um,
Orange. That's one of my favorites. I thought Stanley Kubrick. What
yeah,
were your thoughts on Clockwork Orange? That was the ultimate classic.
yeah, it's a great movie. It's kind of a terrifying movie too because of everything you see this character go through and his psychosis, and then he ends up essentially being reprogrammed by the government, and he becomes the very thing that he like is on the other side of the spectrum, right? Because if I remember this correctly, and I haven't watched this movie in a bit, but he ends up becoming a police officer, right? Or no, at the end he's harassed. He's released and he's harassed by his friends who have become police officers. So it's almost like it's. I mean, the story itself is an allegory for how the government or how society, or you can be reprogrammed into essentially losing what makes you unique, even if you are a violent individual like that. He was like, he's the most Alex DeLarge is the most extreme example a teenager who gone wild, right? He's like committing crimes, he's doing all the shit, but at the end of the day, there's that moral question of like, should he have been essentially reprogrammed the way that he was? Was there a more humane way to treat with his psychosis, right? And I'm saying psychosis, I'm not diagnosing him, but it just, to me, to do the type of insane shit that he was doing, you kind of got to be a little psychotic, you know?
Mm-hmm. And I remember watching that too. It's like with some themes I would probably not want to talk as well too. And of course, being with your dad around Warner Brothers and all that. And I was just thinking about, you talked about some of the cartoons that was going on and everything else. What are some of my favorite Warner Brother characters you enjoyed watching? I was just going to think about that, but then we got off on this and off on that. I was just thinking about that.
I really liked Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck. Those were the ones I grew up watching a lot. There was also around a time where like Steven Spielberg started collabing with Warner, and he produced a whole bunch of animations. He made Pinky and the Brain,
Animaniacs. That's one of my favorites. Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah. So I watched those too. Those were a lot of fun. It's funny because my household was so much like Warner Brothers, I kind of missed out on the whole like Disney thing. And Disney is so massive in America, it almost like feels like I missed like an entire chunk. Because I hear people like, especially people I hang out with who do like improv or other things, like they'll talk about Disney movies all the time, and I'm like, I missed that because there's a lot of competition among the majors, right? And like they really don't mess with each other. But yeah, that was my household. It was a lot of Bugs Bunny, a lot of Wile E. Coyote, and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you've done some celebrity impersonations as well too, and you speak 3 languages, and plus you're an avid swimmer, holding Olympic qualifying times. Yeah. It's like, how does one do that? It's like, I don't know if I could be able to swim as fast. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't have those qualifying times anymore. I stopped swimming when I was 18, but when I was around 11, 12, I started training to be a swimmer, and there was like a big thing in my family, and to just have that because of the discipline that comes with it. So I eventually ended up going to a boarding school where I could continue training, and the boarding school was Bowles in Jacksonville, Florida. It was a very intense year of my life because I was by myself for the first time when I was 12. But it taught me a lot. The school itself, like I think the year that I got there, the athletes, the high school athletes at the school, they had combined won over 23 medals or something at the previous Olympics. So the head coach of the school was also the head coach of the women's swimming team, for the U.S. So it definitely had a lot of really talented people there. So and I got into the schedule of practicing getting in the pool at 5:30 in the morning, and then leaving at 7:30, and then going to class, and then leaving around 3 and getting back in the pool and doing other kinds of exercises. And I did that for years until I was 18, and I just like burned out, and I couldn't do it. And it wasn't my real passion. I was throughout this whole time still going on auditions, still doing acting training and theater productions and all this stuff, and the little bit of time that I had, and making things with my brother. So I always wanted to go back to that. Even when I was swimming, it's like such a lonely sport because your head's literally buried in the water the whole time for hours a day. And
just like a cartoon, pretty much. Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah. So, and I would be thinking of these things that I wanted to produce, these creative ideas. And, it was like really frustrating because I would write them down and I wouldn't have as much time as I would like to produce all that stuff because I was so focused on swimming. But, after I essentially had that ended, I had more time to do it.
Okay.
So,
And plus, this also led you to a career of being Def Noodles. We'll talk about that transformation with Dennis Feitosa. We'll listen to Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Also brought to you by official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson's The Missing, available on Amazon and paperback and ebook. We'll be back with you, multi-talented actor, comedian, and writer Dennis Feitosa, best known as Def Noodles, after this time out. We're back with the multi-talented Dennis Feitosa here on the Mike Widener Show, and he goes from Dennis to being Def Noodles. And tell us about the transformation going from you, Dennis, to being Def Noodles.
Yeah, so that's it was an interesting moment in my life. I lived in New York for a long time, and I needed a change of scenery. I got an offer to come out here produce videos for YouTubers, and I started learning about the YouTube algorithm and how to make content for YouTube, which is a science in and of itself. And at one point, I just decided to make videos for myself. I was already making videos like for years, but never like it was different. I decided to make videos specifically to perform well on YouTube, and I created a bunch of channels, and I was essentially, experimenting with what worked and what didn't. And I was like, at one point, I was producing like 6, 7 videos a day, but I was in LA. It was really broke. The apartment I had was like the size of my bathroom now, and I couldn't film videos in there. So I moved everything to the kitchen that I shared with my roommate, and I just put a green screen behind me, and I was, I'd record these videos all day long, in between making videos for other YouTubers and videos that would actually, make me money. And I would, and then I because it was like such a depressing scenario, and I was like so hot, and I was sweating in this kitchen all the time. I was thinking like, what's something that could, remind me of a good time in my life, or keep that memory going. And I remember when I was a kid in Brazil, playing video games. When you get a high score in a video game, you get the 3 letters that you can put your initials on.
Oh, I
And
remember that. Yes.
yeah,
And of course, you got really creative too. Like you just create words, write a message and all that. I remember that.
yeah.
Like, what were some of your favorite video games back then?
Oh yeah, some of my favorite ones. I mean, I like to play Time Crisis. It's like a first-person shooter game. A lot of I like those games. There's like I like the strategy of it, and but yeah. So like the whole thing with the high score. So you put your first 3 initials. My initials are DFF, but as a kid, I didn't understand that it was like the first letters of your name. I thought it was the first 2 letters of my first name and the first letter of my last name, because I was just like some miscommunication with me being from Brazil, and in Brazil and seeing that. So that's why I would write Def in all these whenever I got a high score in whatever game I was playing. And then the noodles part was just, I was in my kitchen. So I remember this, and I was looking around. I was like, okay, what could be another thing? And I just saw noodles. I was just eating noodles all the time because I was broke.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where that name came from. And it first started off as a reaction channel, which essentially the people who were following me would recommend things that they wanted me to watch and react and comment on. And then, later on, it started evolving into other things. And I started pushing in different directions and experimenting with different content. And eventually, it ended up becoming a parody news channel where I would make fun of, news and different things that were happening, mostly on the internet and on the influencer news side. And I was essentially satirizing an entire community of commentators on YouTube who take everything super seriously, way more seriously than it has to be taken. And, and that kind of ended up, growing a lot. But what was really scary was that people started taking me seriously, even though it was like very apparent. And I had said from the beginning, pretty much, I did an interview beginning of 2020 or maybe end of 2019 where I explained that this was all a joke, right? Because I started doing this news parody, I think November 2019, and it started picking up. So somebody interviewed me, I think February 2020, and asked me about it. And that's what I said at the time. And, and it was just scary because in like almost 2 years, it became like a monster. And it was like, I can't believe it. Like, people are actually taking this shit seriously. Like, they're taking my word. Like, they don't understand.
News.
Fake news. Exactly. And like, the funny thing was that I would literally tell people, like, if you take my news show as a news show, you will be misinformed. And that almost made people want to believe everything even more. It's like, it's just the reverse psychology of it is just like absolutely insane. So over time it started evolving, and I recently, maybe like 2 or 3 months ago, I just ended up killing the series because I was just like, I can't keep doing that. Not only is it not creatively fulfilling for me anymore, but it's starting to get like legitimately scary, right? Like people are taking my jokes and things that I say as a joke, like seriously, and recontextualizing it as though it's something serious. So I just moved on from that, and I've been in the last few months kind of resetting creatively, and it's been a big time of transition anyway. It's I started this club it's right behind me. It's in that other side of the wall over there. This comedy club, and so it's been interesting to see where all this is going. I'm curious to see how far it's gonna go and where it's gonna go, and it's like a whole new journey.
And it sounds like it too. Of course, getting back to the part about where people can argue about something, believe it's true. Is just like, okay, here's a pencil, argue about it, or like say, here's a phone, let's argue about it. Stuff like that. Or they say if it's on the internet, it probably is true. So
yeah. Well, I would actually go as far to say if it's on the internet, it's probably not true. I think nowadays, like, there's so much misinformation and fake news, and even if it's actual information that gets shared out there, there's so many people who will spin it in a way that benefits them. So you have to almost be media literate to a point where you have to read like 5 or 6 different sources just so you can get an objective point of view on what is actually happening. Because a lot of the times nowadays, everything's been so editorialized, you get the opinion before you even get the news itself. And that's really terrifying, because what is even information anymore?
I remember back in the day where it's like you had the fairness doctrine, like say if you had like say a Republican show, you had to have a Democrat, speak for 15 minutes, and then you had a Democrat on his show, you had a Republican speak for 15 minutes. I think that should kind of bring back in a way too. So it's just like, and it's good to have like more than one source and everything else. And the thing is that people hear one story and hear that's it. So, people do need to be trained about hearing more sources and everything else. And of course, going to a comedy club and all that. So it's like, people forget about it. And of course you get up on stage and, maybe some of the things like to talk about, joke about, and everything else. And maybe hit some of the things that hit people hard and everything else like that. Before we talk more about your comedy venture, who are some of your favorite comedians and comedy shows growing up?
I like a lot of different comedians for different reasons. I guess some of the specials that really like I've watched a lot that really impacted me. Dave Chappelle's Killing Them Softly. Robin Williams's Weapons of Mass is it Mass Destruction? No, Weapons of Something Destruction was his last special on HBO. Chris Rock's I think it's Bigger and Blacker. And then I've also watched a lot of the non like big comics. I've watched Bill Burr live too. I've watched a lot of comedy. I like comedy in general. I just like hearing people's different point of view and just seeing how they make that funny. To me, that's interesting, right? Because you learn so much, not just about the world, but you learn about like people's humanity through what they find funny and how they can turn something tragic into funny, right? And that's part of the reason why I love this business more than anything, because it's just, at the end of the day, it's just people like communicating in the rawest form.
And I think that's something that's really amazing as well too. And where can we find your YouTube channel, your comedy channel, comedy club, and everything? Where can we find all your works at, Dennis?
So it's youtube.com/Def Noodles for a lot of the stuff that we discussed. There's another page where you can find the shows. It's defnoodleshow.com. It's youtube.com/Def Noodle Show. I just got banned on Twitch, so you can't watch it on Twitch anymore.
Ah, darn it. I was just going to watch it after this. and by the way, what we say is officially true, guys. It is official. We're not putting on this caption crap, guys. This is true, guys.
Yeah. So.
And what that guy said in the background was true also.
It was true. Yeah, we got Corey over here. We got Corey and Steven. They're hanging around. They're two comics. Steven co-hosts the show with me, and Corey is a very funny comic too.
Oh,
Uh,
if they're there right now, why don't you have them come on in and join in?
yeah,
I mean,
you guys
it's an
want to say
authentic
hi?
event. You guys want to come in?
You want to say hi? You want to say hi?
Yeah,
Guys,
come. Hey, come on
no,
in. I don't
it's
bite.
doing an interview.
Hey there. Hi, guys. How are you?
That's Mike. That's Corey. That's Steven.
Hey, guys. Nice to meet you. Welcome to the Mike Wagner Show.
Yeah. So that's Steven and Corey. They're very funny comics. But yeah, that's what we're now. I'm creating a comedy community, and you know, kind of focusing on expanding that. It's so it's been a lot of fun. There isn't really a name for the club yet. We're kind of in the process of launching everything. But if you're ever in LA and you want to watch some funny shows, we have funny shows every night. They're on 7426 West Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. It's in the heart of West Hollywood. It's a lot of fun, and come hang out with us and hear some funny jokes.
We certainly will do so. And of course, the more you drink, the funnier the comedian is. That's what they
100%.
say back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to have a couple of Jacks too and watch on stage. So make it a 2-for-1 just for me here. So
Yep.
We certainly do still in a couple of gel shots. We're here with Dennis Feitosa, best known as Def Noodles, here on the Mike Wagner Show, actor, comedian, writer from Brazil, talking to Los Angeles here. And just a few more things. We'd love to have you back on and give us an update on some comedy and everything else. What else can we expect from you in 2022 and 2023 and beyond?
Well, I'm definitely going to keep posting more videos on YouTube. I'm going to keep posting, more podcast episodes. And I think as far as something new, I was working on a half hour before the pandemic started. And then that kind of threw a wrench on everything. So probably I'm probably a half hour for me pretty soon. And then once I start putting those out, it's going to be like every 6 months. So
that's really interesting, and we're certainly looking forward to that, Dennis. And who do you consider biggest influence in your career?
My biggest influence, I don't know, probably my parents, my dad, my mom. Yeah, I saw them work a lot, and I saw how hard they worked. So it's probably what it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of Looney Tunes behind, which makes it well worth it too.
Yeah.
And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
Just keep doing it. Just ignore the haters. They don't know jack shit.
And that's
Did I say that? Yeah.
Of course. I think you said that quite a number of times, and we're not censoring if we're crap. You know that.
Okay.
So.
All right.
you have no worries about it. You're safe with me, Dennis.
All right. Sounds good.
Definitely, too. We're here with Dennis Feitosa, best known as Def Noodles, here on the Mike Wagner Show. Dennis, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Learned a lot. Looking forward to having you soon. Make sure you keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Love to have you back. And once again, tell us about your upcoming project. What's your website? How do people contact you? Where can people purchase or check out your works at?
So yeah, youtube.com/Def Noodles to get the main channel content. YouTube.com/Def Noodles show to get the shows out here. We're at 7426 West Hollywood. 7426 West Sunset Boulevard in West Hollywood, the heart of West Hollywood, down the block from like the Laugh Factory and the Comedy Store and all these really great clubs. And we have some amazing comedians out here. If you want to come through and check it out and have some laughs, that's where you can come.
We'll certainly check that out. Once again, Dennis, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely amazing. Looking forward to having you soon. Make sure you keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Love to have you back. We wish you all best, and you've got definitely a great future ahead of you.
Thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate you. Thank you for having me on.